What's up? Good morning. Well, at least it's good morning here today. Let's start a new case today. We're going to do an upper locator case. So I'm just going to run through this order entry quick for you. Upper left corner, new order. We are going to, for this one, just name it test 1. And I'm going to put Brown because I know it's patient Brown. But you can do whatever you want. Select a single tooth. I know this is on the upper. Select removable. And I'm just going to create the order because I have a scan to import. So I'm not going to actually be scanning the model on this one. All right, we got our order created. I right click on that. Import scan, I select. And there's my STL. Double click on that. And there we go. You can see we have our case here. So just looking at this case, I can see we don't have an outlined specific design, but there is a bead line in this case. So we're going to do an exposed horseshoe with mesh and then work our way around these locators. So let's just open that one up here. All right, so here we go. Path of insertion, not overly critical with this type of case since we're really not making contact with any of these implants. I'm going to keep it pretty balanced. Our default though, just FYI, is 4 degrees. Let me make this window a little smaller so you can see the full thing. There we go. Now you guys should be able to see. Anyways, as I was saying, 4 degrees is our default on when we're doing partials, but that can be adjusted, and we do adjust it sometimes depending on the case. So I am going to just soften this tissue, this rugai a little bit, add a little bit of wax. I'm doing a lot of things off screen that you can't see. I do use a gaming pad. My left hand, it is a product made by Razer, but as you can see in the bottom left here, I'm adjusting my intensity and my diameter of my wheel tool, applying wax here. All right, the rest of this looks pretty good. I'm gonna go next, and we're gonna lay our pattern here. So we have 2 types of mesh that we use as part of our DME library. You notice that all of the parts that we have edited or modified in-house are labeled -BDL. So for this type of case where we have a lot of area of mesh, I'm going to use this bigger diameter hole, the 3mm. So we call it strength mesh. I'm going to select that. And then our resin gap, our default is 0.60 millimeters. That's the spacing from underneath the mesh to the tissue. So we want to leave room for acrylic. That's our default. Now, if we wanted heavy spacing, we go to 0.8. If we want thin, we go to 0.4. But again, our default is 0.6. So I will select that. And like the previous lower locator case I did, I'm going to split this mesh intentionally, so we try to get an even amount of holes applied just because it's a 3Shape issue or constraint sometimes we're trying to work around. I'm trying to make sure I don't get too close to these. You want to leave enough room for that attachment. just right clicking and then add a point when I want to add a point in the spline like that. I'm not loving how this is laying out. So again, if I right click on here and do fast edit line, I can draw and recorrect that, and then right click, uncheck, and then my points come back, which is a really nice feature. They didn't originally always have that option, but it is useful. So I'm looking at this bead line thinking of my exposed horseshoe, that exposed major connector, with that in mind of essentially butting up and connecting to that. And I just want, a small horseshoe that's going to be from this bead line up. So I'm going to bring this down. It is much easier with the drawing on here. And I don't think this one, this does not have a texture scan with a drawing. But I do suggest, if you have a physical model, to put a drawing on it ahead of time. Even if it's just a quick outline, it will save you time. When you have a quick reference, you're not trying to rework your splines. One tip I would add here, this spacing here is pretty narrow. I could try to get this meshwork up in here, but I know that that is going to affect the layout and the spacing of the holes when they try to apply. So there's a different workaround that I'll do there, and I will show you that in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select resin gap. So really what I'm just laying down is like sheet relief. I'm matching this 0.6, I'm matching that gap height to what this mesh will be. And I'm just throwing a little piece in here, and it'll make sense later why. So we'll lay that down. All right, and then let's pop back to our strength mesh, 3mm hole. There we go. There we go. So you can see how this resin gap is at 0.6 here and matches in height here. Okay, so we're gonna rotate this mesh. I click on the point, but don't move the point. And then I get this tool here, so I can adjust. I can grab the blue ball right in the center. I'm gonna line up and make parallel this row of holes here with this yellow spline, and then I click off the part. And then the same thing here, click on a blue ball, you get the tool, you can rotate by grabbing the outer ring, grab the center blue ball, and you can pull. And again, I'm going for parallel with the yellow line. And then we have to re-preview to get that to apply. Now, if you want to get real picky, you could adjust this resin gap if you want to have this full exposure of major connector. The way you do that is by clicking on a point and then holding shift. And then the weird thing is, so when you're holding shift, you're clicking on a point, you're holding shift, and then you bring your cursor arrow down into the yellow. See how you get that green perimeter? So you're still holding shift, and then with the scroll wheel on the mouse, you're scrolling towards you, and you will move the resin gap. Again, I'm still holding shift here, and it's moving the resin gap away wherever the point of the mouse is hovering. Now, if I wanted to push it forward, I would scroll forward on the scroll wheel while I'm holding shift. It is a little laggy, especially when you have a really big piece of mesh. So it is a little time consuming. This, again, if you're being very particular in how you want this done, you can bring this up. And I'm going to bring this up on this one because it's a really good example to show you how to adjust this. Again, you have to be hovering where you're hovering with the mouse. You can see my white pointer here, and I'm scrolling with the scroll wheel while holding shift and bringing that resin gap or sheet relief in the analog world to the edge of the mesh. Ooh. Let's come back. I'm going to click again, hold shift, scroll, Bring this up. And there we go. Very nice laid out. So we're going to class bean. Obviously there's no class, but what we're going to do is select from our library of parts here our fill mesh. And one thing about the fill, library, again, that this part in the behind the scenes is vertically set to the same thickness as the mesh. If you just take a clasp, like let's just say we grab a T-bar or T-clasp, yeah, it'll fill it, it works, but it's not vertically the same height. So then you end up spending time, bringing it down or smoothing it. So if you use the fill piece for mesh that we have in the library already, it's much easier. And that library, the DME library, is actually where you upload files in our LaserTech print service. On the bottom of the upload screen is our access to our DME library to download it at any time if you need to add it to your 3Shape. So what we're going to do is wrap this nice. Again, this is optional. It just makes it look a little cleaner. And I'm going to show you how now we use this resin gap fill. And I'm using Shift and my scroll wheel here. I'm holding Shift and my scroll wheel on my mouse to go wider. And if I hold Control, you can see a scroll wheel. I can go vertically up and down. Sometimes I'll do like a part like this where you have two coming forward. And if I want a really clean edge, I'll do it like that. Or I can right click and put a spline in the middle like this. Kind of give it that curve. Again, this is getting really picky. Like that. I'll get a little more width here, a little more strength. That looks good. Let's preview that. There we go. And we're going to go next. We're going to go to Sculpt. All right. Again, using Shift and holding Shift in your scroll wheel will control your diameter and control. You can see I'm holding control, and my intensity at which I'm adding wax is adjusted. And I have those shortcuts on my left hand for my gaming pad, and I'm just smoothing. The most important thing I can tell you, whether it's a style case like this or just a normal partial, is wherever you're going to lay your finishing line, you want that to be as smooth as possible before you lay the finishing line. It'll give you a much nicer finishing line if you can, like right now I'm removing, I can knock down any high spots. Just knock them down, blend them. Or any low spots, fill a little bit, like I know that finishing line is going to go right here. And then when you lay that finishing line, like I'm going to my next step here, I'm going to select the finishing line wide BDL. It's the only one we use. It's great. Love it. And I'm just plotting right where it's nice and smooth. And this thing's going to give you a nice clean edge then. That's the secret to doing a nice finishing line, is sculpting before you lay it. Notice how the finishing line is facing the wrong way, and I right click and I hit reverse spline. This is totally facing the wrong way. Reverse it. I want that acrylic coming down, hitting that, I'll say, dam. the green line is essentially your internal finishing line. So when we see this where we just move that resin gap back, that's what we created, that step for the acrylic. So I'm coming back. I don't need to be perfectly in line with that green line. It just shows you a reference of what's happening on the underside of the frame. And I'm removing this shortcut with S as in Sam. That'll remove your model if you want to get rid of that when you're working. So what I'm going to do is basically right where this finishing line is meeting my major connector, I'm just going to smooth this a little bit. I'm adding at a very low intensity. You can tell I'm at 5. I mean, I can go between 5 and 10 when I do this. I'm not adding a ton of wax. I just want to blend it real nice and not affect that top edge. See where it's red at the top edge of the finishing line? We want to keep that as crisp as possible. We don't want to smudge that like almost as if you had a flaming tool when you're working in the analog world. You want to keep that as crisp as you possibly can. So you'll notice where I'm adding, notice exactly where my white part of the mouse is in the center or the valley below the finishing line where I'm adding. I'm not affecting that top edge. Okay, so I got that blended nice. Now I'm going to punch a couple holes to blend it where we seam this together. This one I'm going to go to this under the partials group, at least in our library, and go to the RPD. Where is that? This is a 2mm hole. Got it. And for me, it's much easier to use view direction when applying these. Hit plus. And the nice thing with this particular one is you can adjust the size if you want to go, because that's like a 2mm hole and this is a 3mm hole. So if I want to drag this a little bit, you can set these up as defaults too. I'm going to try to match that a little more closely. There, looks pretty good. I'm going to go with that. And our default tissue stop, we do a 3mm tissue stop. I'm going to put that in a posterior. One there. And I would do right about there. This is our default for printing. We do a 0.050 for a line spacer. On this particular one, I don't want stippling on this small exposed horseshoe because by the time we polish that out, there's basically going to be none left. It's too small, so I don't want any. I'm going to keep that smooth, so no stipple added, and that should be it. Let's hit preview. There we go. If we hit S, remove the model, take a look at it from the underside, make sure my tissue stops have fully attached. That rarely can happen where they're kind of floating out in space. Looks good, and close it up. I hope that helped, guys. So again, this is Tim Bertram from Bertram Dental Lab. If you have any other requests, let us know. Enjoy. I hope this helped.